All right, we are back. I'm going to go ahead and get cameras started here. Got Ben Leybovich with us. And it's mic check here. Can you hear me okay, Ben?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Awesome. Awesome. I got one little button to
Good
push
job
over
on
here.
this.
Say again?
Ridiculous what you did here. Good job. I don't
Well,
know if you're any good at real estate, but this stuff, forget it. Forget it. You knocked it out of the ballpark. It's ridiculous.
well, I appreciate it. I know it's been quite a lot of work, but a lot of fun all at the same time. And I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and sharing. And
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to as well.
It's my pleasure.
While I'm getting this set up, you have an event coming up next week, don't you?
We do the 26th and 27th. The Phoenix Syndication Workshop you can see on my T-shirt here.
Phoenix Syndication Workshop. You got T-shirt for, man. See, I don't even have T-shirts for the summit.
Well, see, you're making money at your summit. That's the difference between us. All I got is these syndications, dude. If I could ever figure out how to make money online like you, I'd be like, screw it. Too much hard work.
That's funny. You're funny. All right, let's press the button to go live here. I'm going to give a quick introduction of Ben here, and I keep on pressing the wrong button, and it keeps on popping up a link. All right, so we're recording. We're live. I don't have to worry about Stacy walking in and telling me to press the record button like she had to do it on the last session. I actually remembered it this time. So let's see. The topic here today is going to be setting rents and unit renovations. And so I'm looking forward to this. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about Ben. So Ben's the founder of justaskbenwhy.com. And it features his blog focused on real estate investing as well as his Cash Flow Freedom University. He's a consultant in the field of multifamily underwriting and a published author. He's been investing in income property since 2006 and to date has been the principal in acquisitions totaling $10 million, $1.5 million of which he is the sole equity partner. So Ben, I'm going to turn it over to you, let you go ahead and start sharing your screen here and let you take it away. Like I said earlier, I'll be in the background, but we'll hold all the questions till the end whenever you're finished, okay?
Dan, thank you for the introduction. My pleasure to be with you. The whole stat is about to change. We're under contract on a whatever. Those numbers are going to change. Those numbers are going to change. Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Those of you familiar with Bigger Pockets probably have heard my name here and there. I've been around for a decade, and I love teaching. I enjoy teaching, and I'm not real big on hoorays and all the rest of that stuff. I like to dig into the weeds, and that's what we're going to do today. So I'm going to start my screen share so you guys can see what I see. And we're going to talk about setting of rents. Why are we talking about setting of rents? It's the single most important thing in multifamily. And of course, in syndication. Syndication is a variant of multifamily. Rents hold the absolute, unequivocal key to success or failure in the world of multifamily real estate. Let me tee this conversation up this way. We only buy value add. And there's three specific reasons as to why. We could go out there and just, see a building for sale and buy that building. We're not interested in that. We're actually interested in the delta. We're paying the money for the delta. We're paying the money for the value add. The more the value add, the more we're paying. The reason we're buying value add, three reasons. Number one, as it says on the screen, it represents safety. It represents a safety margin. So what happens is, you buy a property where the average blended rent is, $550 a month, but you see a way to get that to $850 a month. Okay. What you are doing is you are saying to yourself, hey, there's eventually going to be a downturn in the real estate market. If I can do things to these apartments, to this community, to the amenity package, whatever, if I can do things to this community whereby I can attract people that are willing to pay more money for these units, then when the downturn happens, what I will end up with necessarily is the best product in the submarket, because I just spent all this time, money, and energy making it such, right? So we're buying units and we're rehabbing those units and we're replacing the cabinets and we're putting the granite countertops in, and we're, I'm telling you all this. Just yesterday I spent all day at the on-site due diligence for the 117 unit that we have under contract right now. And that's exactly what we're doing. Interior scope is going to be about $7,800 a month. $7,800 to renovate each unit is what I'm trying to say. The interior renoscope, and that basically you're doing all that because you see a perfectly good unit in a great location that would be able to attract a tenant at $300 more than what it's doing now. And that's where most people stop, is like, oh, okay, I'm going to get more rent. That's fantastic. You're going to get more rent. But most importantly, more importantly than that, you're going to be safe in the downturn, right? Because when the downturn happens and the for rent signs pop up everywhere and there's competition everywhere and everybody's lowering prices on their units in order to get, warm bodies in. When this is going on, guess what you are going to have? You're going to have a unit with shaker cabinets, granite countertops, underhung sinks, new appliances, stainless steel, new flooring, this is what you're going to have. And we're late in the cycle, right? And so when you are late in the cycle, especially, I understand that the value add is in and of itself a good thing, but we're looking for safety. Don't lose money first, then worry about making money. And value add represents that safety. So that's number one point I want to make. Number 2 point I want to make is, those of you who've been in real estate for a decade should know that you can't drive returns strictly on a monthly and annualized cash flow basis. The thing about cash flow is it gets discounted in terms of buying power every month and every year the further you go out. So people like to talk about multifamily as long-term hold. Like, I have this cash flow and that's all there is. That's all she wrote. Like, that's manna from the sky. Cash flow is great, but $10 today doesn't buy the same thing as $10 7 years from now. $10 7 years from now, doesn't buy nearly as much as $10 would buy today. So if you're going to be intellectually honest about this cash flow that you are buying, then you have to acknowledge this fact. And that's why we underwrite to the internal rate of return. That's one of the reasons we underwrite to the IRR. But this also makes it mathematically basically impossible in this cycle. Now, if you bought in 2013 and you paid, $40,000 a unit, and today these units are selling for $90,000, and if you're going to sit on it, at that basis, maybe you could drive all the return you want. But in this cycle, if you're buying in this cycle, you're going to need some really big bumps. And so what the value add does is it bumps your rents immediately on day one. That's one thing. And the second thing is it creates an exit, which is actually number 3 on my list here. It creates a profitable exit because it allows you to increase that net operating income. And then you can, and I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but then you can apply a discounted capitalization rate sometime in the future where you think you're going to sell this thing. The reason you want to discount it is because, of course, and that's a long conversation in and of itself, but because, we're probably as low as we're going to get, and at some point cap rates should start going up. So as part of our underwriting, we should probably acknowledge this fact and probably escalate our cap rates somewhat as we go out year 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever. So that escalated cap rate compresses the escalated NOI, so you really need the value add in the first couple of years in order to get yourself that bump in the NOI so you can sustain that formula and create a very profitable exit. And a lot of the IRR is going to be driven by your back-end appreciation. So this is like the baseline. I needed to get this out. This kind of like this phrase, we only buy value add. This is where I stand. We only buy value. And by the way, what I mean by value add is $300 a door. Like, I won't even look at $50 to $75 a door of value add. I'm not going to, it's just not enough, because the inflated cap rate 4 years from now is going to eat into that like you wouldn't believe. And so you got no premium, basically. So it feels good in years 1 and 2, but then there's nothing left to show for it, right? So what we're doing with, us, myself, my partner, the only thing we kind of buy is things that we can see $300 to $350 of value add, which is really where it makes sense to play. So if we only buy value add, and this is, I'm going back to the Greeks, syllogism. If we only buy value add, and if value add is a function of improving the income, which, in the context of this conversation, rents, it's not the only income, but for now, let's just say rents, then we only buy if we can improve the rents. That's the key phrase. We only buy if we can improve the rents. And I could talk about this for 4 hours, and there's enough there to talk about for 4 hours. But that's the syllogism. If we only buy value add because it's necessary that it's value add, and if value add is a function of improving the rents, then we can only buy things whereby we see a clear path to dramatically higher rents for one reason or another. Okay? So we're talking about rents. And this is why I wanted to do this presentation on rents, because this is the whole formula, the whole, 14, 15% IRR over the 10-year hold. The whole thing comes down to how much can you improve the rents. Okay? So that's why we're talking about the rents. So here we go. There are 4 baselines. Well, you're looking at a building, you're considering an acquisition. What are all the angles from which you have to look at rents as part of your analysis process, okay? There are four basic ones. Number 1, schedule of rents. Number 2, the rent roll. 3, the classic market. And 4, the renovated market. Now, I'm telling you this because this is the exercise we go through all the time. So, just the past couple of weeks, the process of underwriting this property that we have in contract now, this is exactly what we do. This is exactly the process we go through. So underwriting, you have to underwrite all 4, because don't forget, what we're looking for here are the deltas. We're looking for inefficiencies which we can fix, which otherwise is known as value add. So you have to look at all 4 of these baselines in order to underwrite the value add. Here we go. Schedule of rents. What is it? Well, if you dial in an apartment name into your Google search or Yahoo or whatever, and apartments.com pops up, or their website pops up, and it says 720 square feet, rent $925. Okay? This is what their schedule for that 1-bedroom, 1-bath unit is. If you go driving in your car and you walk into this apartment complex and you ask them, do you have any 2-bedroom, 2 baths? How much does that cost? They tell you. That's the schedule of rents. Now, thing is, they're not necessarily getting it. That's their wishful thinking, so to speak. Maybe they're getting it. Maybe they're not getting it. This is just the schedule. This is the starting point. We're going to come back to this because we have to put color to it. But for now, let's move on to the next thing, which is the rent roll. So the rent roll is what's actually coming in, right? They have these, tenants in this apartment complex, and they're paying rent every month, and this money is coming in. So forget what they were asking, what they were saying, that 1-bedroom, 1-bath is renting for $925, but then you look at the rent roll and you see that it's really renting, there's a bunch of them rented for $635. Okay? So that is beginning to kind of identify the big picture for you, isn't it? A little bit. So you're starting to see where their thinking is with regard to those two things. So the interesting piece here, again, we're always looking for the deltas. The interesting piece here is that the difference between that which is the schedule of rents and that which is the rent roll is that the schedule is the ask and the rent roll is the receive. Does that make sense? And if the actual rents, as reflected in the rent roll, as reflected in the rents they're actually collecting, are lower than the asking rents, which is the schedule of rent, then you have what is called LTL, which is short for loss to lease. Basically, it's a concept that compares market rate for a specific unit at any given period of time versus what that unit is essentially rented for in actuality, okay? So we've talked about the schedule of rents. We've talked about the rent roll. The third baseline we have to discuss is classic market or classic market rent. So the reason we use the word classic is because if we're going to buy this property as a value add proposition, meaning we're going to get in there and exploit inefficiencies, we're going to upgrade the units, we're going to upgrade the amenity package at the property, we're going to maybe do some things different in management, we're going to institute a RUBS program, whatever it is we're going to do, right? The classic market is us saying, okay, if we don't fix this unit right now, as it sits right now, is what they are asking for it really what should be asked for it? So you remember in the beginning, you went to that website and you looked up that one, and let's just call it 925 square foot. And the asking for it was $925, which is $1 per square foot, right? Just for easy math. Let's call it 925 square feet, $925. So that's $1 per square foot. So the question I'm asking is, forget me remodeling the unit. We'll deal with that later. As it sits, you know, somebody moves out, we take over the property, somebody moves out on day one. How do I know that happens? Somebody moves out day one, we clean it up, we clean the carpets, you know, because it needs to be done, but we don't do any remodeling. We just clean it up enough to rent it. This is our classic unit. What can we get in terms of rent for that unit in that condition, classic condition? Do we agree with the current ownership that it's only $925, which is $1 per square foot? Or do we think that maybe we could get $950 or $975? Now you may ask, why wouldn't they be asking for $975 if that's what they could get? And the reason being is because maybe they're not interested in fighting for the highest top line. Maybe they're interested in the lowest vacancy and they have zero vacancy. Because why? Because they don't have enough, don't ask enough for rent. Right? So the word gets out and people realize, hey, you can get the cheapest units here and it's always 100% occupied. And if this owner's owned the property for 20 years or if this owner bought the property in 2012 for pennies on the dollar, maybe it's not important for them to maximize this property. Maybe what's important is to occupy this property, right? We'll come back to this. Baseline number 4, renovated market. And of course, this is self-explanatory, right? We're saying, okay, well, here's the market for the classic condition. But what if we remodel this unit? What would the market be then? Okay? The delta between the renovated market and the classic market is also an additional LTL. So I like pictures. So hopefully this makes it easier for you guys to kind of visualize what I'm talking about here. So this is what they're getting. I mean, I didn't put numbers down, but you'll see what is going on. This, like, you know, the second notch is what the schedule of rents is. This is what they're asking. This is what they advertise. This is what, if we're going to hold hands, like Sam and I do when we go scoping stuff, if you're going to hold hands and walk into the property and say, excuse me very much, how much could we rent the 2-2 for? And they give us a number. That's it. Okay? But later, we do our research and we find out, hey, they're just trying to keep things low so they're fully occupied. But if you're going to be an aggressive value-add investor, the classic market should really be that, in blue, right? And then we look at on their rent roll, and we realize that they may be asking the schedule of rents, but what they're actually getting is the rent roll. So you see all those deltas, right? You see how this thing moves around. And then, of course, we realize that if we were going to renovate the unit, then the price could be that. So fundamentally, there's delta right there. There's a delta between rent roll and the schedule of rents. Secondly, there's more delta between what they think the market is, which is represented in their schedule of rents, and what we deem the classic market to be. Okay, that's without renovating units. Okay, and then there's finally delta right here, because we're saying if we renovate, this is what we can get. So altogether, this is value add. Okay? And that's what we look for. So all of this represents what we call economic losses as well as the bump due to renovation. So what I am telling you is that at least in Phoenix MSA, which is where we buy, I like this bottom number, this number right here, to be at least $300 per door. I don't really get excited about anything unless I can get it at $300 per door. It has to be more if I'm going to pay more per unit. It could be a little less if I'm going to get a great deal and I'm paying less per unit, because everything is a blend of how much you pay plus how much you spend. So you have capitalization rate on your purchase price, and you have capitalization rate on your renovation scope, and then that blends together and gets you your investment return for the blended amount that you're spending and timed and all of that. So typically, though, we're talking about $300 to $350 per door that's necessary at today's pricing, where the market is today. Okay? So as part of underwriting of any opportunity, we have to determine the following. Number one, is the current schedule of rents correct? Because if it's not, number two, what should the classic rent schedule be? And number three, what should the rents be if we were to renovate? And how much would we have to renovate? That's subset of this number three. And how much would it cost? And what the amenities we should put in? That's all a function of the market. Okay? Setting of classic rents. Let's talk about classic rents. So, rule number one, find best comps. Well, what does that mean? That means similar location, similar unit size, similar age of the building, similar style and layout, both at the community level and inside the units, similar community amenities, similar in unit features. You get the point, right? You're used to this. If you've operated in the SFR space, you're used to comparative market analysis. That's exactly what we're doing here, is we're comparing our product that we're trying to place numbers to other product in the market, and we're trying to figure out how do we compete? Where do we compete? Where does this thing fit into the fabric of the marketplace? So rule number one is find the best comps. And this is very specific. I had one guy one time sent me a thing, and he was looking at purchasing this apartment complex, and he wanted to partner on it. So he had some units in it that ended up being 2-story units. They were 1,000 square feet, and there were 2-story units. And he sent me a comp that validated, supposedly, that rents on those units could be, whatever, $1,200 a month. Okay? What he didn't realize is that the 1,000 square foot comp he was looking at was a fantastic, flat, on one level, garden style apartment that was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, that was fantastic layout, very large, very spacious, vaulted ceiling, the whole 9 yards, okay? Whilst what he was looking at was a box that went first floor, second floor. Somehow they fit 2 bedrooms upstairs into the second floor of that unit. And I can't remember the exact square footage and the exact numbers, but I looked at that and I said, there's no way in hell you're getting this. You're not getting this rent. It's not the same product. People aren't going to comparing the two products that are close, sitting in the same submarket. They're not going to choose to pay the same price for the same, these two products. So it's very important in terms of setting your rent to be talking about very like comparisons. Number one. Rule number two, and this is kind of a can that I'm opening here. It says use per square foot basis. So this stuff gets pretty scientific in a hurry. We absolutely have to use price our rents on a per square foot basis. In other words, if you are comparing 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit to a 737 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1 unit. You are comparing 2-bedroom, 1 unit here to 2-bedroom, 1 unit here. Yes, you're comparing 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit, but they're not. The one is 1/4 square feet less than the other. So how do you do that? How do you compare those? Let's say it's your only comp. Let's say your only good comp in a community that's the same age in this location, and the unit happens to be 25% bigger than what you've got. How do you compare? Do you just take the per square foot price of your comp, which happens to be bigger, and of course, the per square foot comp, anytime the unit grows larger in size, per square foot pricing comes down, right? It's just simple math. In the same marketplace, right? In the same submarket. So what do? Do you use that per square foot price in a larger unit and just blindly apply it to your unit and take that discount and call that done? Or do you ask yourself, you know what? My units are smaller, but they still have 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. So I know I need to be cheaper than the other unit that's larger, but how much cheaper? Does it have to be a linear relationship, or can I tweak that? All right. And the answer is always you can tweak that, because the smaller, I just mentioned, the smaller your units get, the higher per square foot price you can typically get away with. Okay. Because you're essentially offering the same amenities. You're offering 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. Yes, it's smaller and people are going to want a discount, but how much discount? Then you take the next step and you say, what about the condition? If that 1,000 square foot unit is old junk and I am buying my stuff and my stuff, isn't as old, shouldn't somebody be willing to pay more, right? That's the kind of thinking that goes into that setting of classic rents. Rule number 3, blended and weighted. So when we're talking about apartment communities, typically you have a nice mix of unit layouts. So you have 1 bedrooms, you have studios, you have 2 bedrooms. So it's important to look at each one of those unit layouts individually and comp them against the competition. But it's also important to then blend that number and weight it, according to how many of which size unit you have, which style unit you have, and compare that blended and weighted number on a per square foot basis to your competition. That's less important than comparing each unit individually, but it gives you a good big picture, rule of thumb. You don't want to be too far low or too far high. That's just going to tell you that maybe you can adjust some things on a per unit basis in this floor plan or that floor plan. Make sense? Okay. Setting of renovated rents. This is where it really gets fun, because some of it is art and some of it is science. Like the previous thing, this is mostly all science, because you are not trying to project anything into the future. All you are doing here is you are snapping a picture in time, and you are saying, here's me, here's my competition. What's going on here versus what's going on there, and how do I fit into that? But it's factual stuff. You're not trying to guesstimate the future in any way, shape, or form. And that's where kind of the tricky stuff starts. So if there are renovated comps, obviously you have to match them, right? So in order to match them, you just go through the process we just described for the classic rents, but you apply them to the renovated rents. So let's say your comps are renovated, they have similar square footage, the renovations included wide cabinets, they were shaker cabinets, they included a countertop that wasn't solid surface, but it was Formica, but it was nice, and they included black appliances, okay? Whereas you're going to go in and you're going to renovate, but you're going to put in shaker cabinets, and you're going to put granite tops, and you're going to do underhung sinks, and you're going to do stainless steel appliance package. So now this is where it gets artsy-fartsy a little bit. Now you're asking yourself, okay, they have a very nice renovated unit, and they're getting $1.32 per square foot. Is my even nicer renovated unit only worth $1.32 per square foot, just like theirs? Or do I think I can get a little bit better because of my renovation scope? So the question is very artistic. It's at some point, this is a little bit less math and a little more. This is where it's important to be working with a PM who has extensive knowledge and extensive presence in the marketplace. Hugely important. It's also important, in my opinion, to have a partner who's local, because you have to have boots on the ground to really underscore these dynamics that we're talking about here. Now, if there are no renovated comps, then it really gets artsy-fartsy, because now what you're asking is, how much more are folks in this location willing to pay for a better unit? You don't have any baseline for the answer. You are coming in to a submarket where every building is built in 1976 through 1979, and nobody's bothered to renovate. And now you are going to be the first one, and this is your business plan, and you need to know how much you can hike those rents. Well, how are you supposed to know the answer to that question if nobody else came before you? And yet, it's the best kind of value add that you can get. On the one hand, you don't want to be the first coming in, because you might, get dead if you are wrong about the marketplace dynamics. On the other hand, before anybody else knows to do it, if you're in, you have a foothold in a sub-market that nobody else knows about yet, and you have competitive advantage with that. So it's a very, it's not a risk-free proposition. It's a very serious and dangerous thing to do, and you better be right when you do it, and you better have solid logic when you do it. So for us, we just purchased a community 4 months ago, and we're doing the exactly same scope. It's 10 miles away, so now we're purchasing this one. So we're not coming in blindfolded. We kind of know how people respond because we already know we're placing people in these renovated units, so we know how people are going to respond. So it's just an incredible advantage that you have. But before you can do it, before the first time you do it, if there's nobody else is doing it, how do you know? What do you rely on? What kind of data do you rely on? Fundamentally, a lot of it is a little more artsy-fartsy than we like to think of real estate, right? We want to think it's all numbers and it's all this and that and the other. The fact of it is you get a PM on the property with you walking the property, and the PM has 10, 15, 20,000 units under management. And they have a sense and a heartbeat of the marketplace. And they will tell you, yeah, you can get the bump. And at some point, there are no numbers necessarily that can support that until you do it, in which case, at that point, there will be numbers. But somehow rather, you have to do it because that, my friends, is value add, okay? It's easy when somebody else came before you, but the fact of it is you're probably not going to get your nose in that marketplace. Nobody's going to let you once somebody else has got it figured out. So the top line is defined by Class A. What do I mean by that? If you're buying a renovation project, you're buying a property that's been around for some time, and you're going to make it nice. You're going to make it very nice. However, is it ever going to be as nice as new construction? Answer, no. Therefore, the top line for where your rents can ever potentially be is always identified by Class A. It's new construction and construction within the last 10 years, let's say, okay? You really don't want to compete with that. What you want is you want to be able to bring to the market a product that is really competitive with Class A, but quite a bit lower basis. So you're not asking the same kind of rents, and you don't have nearly the same kind of all-in cost. So just to give you an example, $90,000 per door acquisition with a $15,000 per door all-in renovation budget gets you, $105,000 basis. That basis gets you blended weighted rents of, $1,000. Okay, so basically one-to-one ratio, $1,000. Okay. New construction, though, if this building were to be torn down, or if somebody buys land across the street or next door to you and builds a very similar apartment complex, they are more likely than not going to have a basis of $200,000 per door. But their rents, yes, they're going to be higher than $1,000, but they might only be $1,400 or so. So your basis is $105,000 and you are getting $1,000 of rent. Their basis is twice as high, $200,000, and they're only getting $1,400 of rent. So first of all, your rents need to be lower enough from them to where when the Class A gets compressed, you're okay. And secondly, your basis needs to be lower considerably than the Class A construction in order so that you have staying power. I'm going off on tangents. There's a lot of economics here, and I really don't mean to make a big deal out of it, but the top line, in many ways, more than one way, is defined by the Class A. where is your building after you renovate it, after you add the amenities, after you renovate the interiors of the units, where is your building going to fit on the spectrum relative to Class A construction? Whoops. Okay. Not sure what happened with my slide. Let's talk now about renovation budgets. $4,500 for a typical unit will buy you what I call lipstick on the pig. Okay? So it'll get you new flooring. It'll get you some new paint. It will maybe get you some fixtures. It'll get you resurfaced countertops. It'll get you maybe white or black appliances, nothing fancy. Just about $4,500. Okay? For about $6,000, you are talking about maybe replacing the countertops with new Formica countertops, maybe some nicer fixtures, maybe some nicer flooring, maybe a two-tone paint scheme. For, if you're going to replace the countertops with some kind of solid surface, you are talking about, hitting up against 7,000 plus, depending on the size. And then if you're talking about replacing the cabinets, then you are talking between $7,500 and $8,000. That's kind of the typical interior renovation scope. So if you put that together, you've got, let's say you opt for, and this is a conversation we can have in a minute, why you would do that, but let's say you opt for a really good high scope renovation where you really are replacing everything. It's a shell, you're replacing the cabinets, you're replacing everything, okay? That costs you $8,000 per unit. Then on the exterior, you're gonna build a dog park, you're gonna do things to laundry, you're going to build a fitness center, you're gonna do X, Y, Z, okay? So let's say per unit, you spend another $5,000 on the exterior. You gotta paint the building, that's gonna cost you, $100,000 to do that. You got a couple of, 20, 30 HVAC units that need replaced right away, that kind of thing. So all in, it's very common for us to see $12,000, $13,000 renovation scopes, all in, interior and exterior. And for that, I need to see $300 per door bump, plus or minus. I need to see at least, $225 in actual bump, classic to renovated. And I need to be able to see at least like $100 more that I can recover in LTL, okay? Which brings me to about $300. Okay. Why would you do this remodel as opposed to a lipstick on the pig? I just had this conversation with one of my partners this morning. And I don't know if you guys agree. How am I doing on time? 2:13.
You're doing great. We don't have a stop time until 4:45.
Cool. Okay. Dan, if there's any questions, because I have this slide thing, you know what? I'm going to minimize it and see if I can get to the questions myself. If there's questions, I'll take questions.
Sure. So as you guys are listening, if you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in. Go ahead and type them into the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that we ask those questions to Ben here. And as he's hopefully you can get your PowerPoint up there. Were you able to get the PowerPoint up?
I don't know what the heck happened to the PowerPoint, so I'll just keep on talking because I know things I need to talk about, but
well, here's a question that's come through. I'll go ahead and answer this. Pose you this question and
Sure.
And go from there. So this one is a question that says, do you have your own vendors to buy appliances, flooring, or do you use property management vendors? And how much do you pay for your appliance package on average?
The appliance package on average is going to cost me about $1,600 to $1,700. We buy factory direct. We utilize, it's a good question. We utilize a property manager with tens of thousands of units under management. So obviously they have standing relationships and they have a lot of pricing power. But yeah, I don't micromanage that side of it. So what happens with us is that we include the property manager functions as a general contractor for us on these jobs. And we include a fee as part of the renovation budget. So if I say my renovation budget is $1.5 million, my renovation budget is really only about $1.3 million. And then there is a 5% contingency, and then there's a 5% construction management fee that is built in for my property manager specifically to handle the construction management on this project. Make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. And next question here is what's your base rent absolute price range when you are looking for $300 to $350 rental value add?
That's a really good question. I do not have a baseline for rent. Let me answer it this way. When you are around real estate long enough and you experience CapEx cycles, this is capital expense cycles. When you experience those, you realize that you have to be putting money aside every month because eventually stuff is going to stop breaking down. So when most people, I should say a lot of people, but when most newbies underwrite multifamily, the easy expenses to see are the things that are coming out on a monthly basis. Like I got to pay the gas and I got to pay electric and I got to mow the grass and I got to pay taxes and insurance and I got to pay payroll, that kind of thing. What's difficult to see is the stuff that doesn't happen today, and maybe it didn't happen yesterday, but it will happen tomorrow or the day after, and your job is to be prepared for it happening. Well, there's a certain level of rent that is absolutely necessary on a stabilized operation basis in order so that you can be setting money aside and be prepared. And I would say that in the apartment setting, you're talking about at least $625, $650 per unit, simply because, it fluctuates because, in Ohio and Indiana, you have higher taxes, for instance, than you have some places in the Southwest or Texas, for instance, right? So, it fluctuates, whether it's $595 as your break even or $650 as your break even. It's a lot of it depends on your property tax levels, your insurance levels, things like that. But it's certainly nothing less. I see people all the time underwriting things where stabilized rent, like after you fix everything up, is $500. And I'm saying, listen, if you pay your mortgage and you pay your insurance and you pay your all of the other expenses, and then you go to Big Pockets and post a thread about how great you're doing on cash flow, I just laugh, and Dan laughs, because we know something. And what we know is, 3 years from now, you're going to have a question. Do I really keep this cash flow in my pocket, or do I spend it to replace the water heater? Because guess what? That water heater is going to break. And you didn't have that in your budget. And on a $500 rent, you can't afford to have it in your budget, because it becomes a question of it's either your cash flow or your CapEx. And nobody likes to think about it this way. So there is a minimum, like if you go through all of the mechanicals in every building, you have piece of flooring, piece of lighting, you have a piece of roofing, you have windows, you have doors, you have appliances, and you amortize or depreciate their lifespans by what they're depreciated by, and you set that amount of money aside every single month from the rent that comes in what you begin to realize is that you need a certain level of rent coming in order so that you can take that money and depreciate it and set it aside and be prepared to replace that thing that breaks because it's the end of its life cycle. Okay? That minimum rent is probably no less than $600. Now, to answer your question, the other side of the question, which is, what's my minimum if I'm bumping $300? I don't have the answer to that question because I really don't care. I'm not underwriting what's there, and I'm not buying what's there. I'm buying what's going to be there when I'm done doing whatever it is I'm going to do. I'm underwriting completely differently. So it doesn't really matter to me what the rents are when I take it, because I'm going to get to work on it. And the reason I'm buying it has nothing to do with what's there. I'm not buying a cash flow investment. I am buying an investment that, well, I'll describe it to you this way. Think a flip. You know, when you buy a house, what's the first thing, like a house to flip? Yeah, you buy a house to flip, to renovate and sell. What's the first thing, the first question you ask? You don't ask, how much can I buy it for? You ask, how much will I sell it for? They call it ARV, after repaired value. How much will I sell it for when I've done everything I need to do? That's the same question I ask with apartments. So in my mind, it may be that my apartment complex takes 3 years to flip, or 5 years, or 10 years. It's just a span of time that increases. But the point being, I'm buying it in order to sell it for much more than what I paid for it. Now, the mechanics of that are very different because the value setting mechanism is not a comparable sales analysis like it is in the single family residence space. We're capitalizing a value. So somehow rather, I need to ask the question of, what's the NOI going to be when I'm ready to sell it, and what cap rate should I use to capitalize a value at for that NOI that's going to be there when I'm ready to sell it? Because that's how the mechanism of value setting works in multifamily. But those are the questions I ask. I really don't care what's there now. I'm going to recapture what's there now. Whether the rent is $400 or the rent is $600 makes no difference. If the big picture works, it works. And the cash flow is just there to support me staying in the deal long enough so that I can execute the long-term flip. Does that make sense?
Next question is, do you invite your vendors to estimate the cost of renovations during the purchase process, or do you use historical data for an estimate?
Both. However, yesterday, we were doing due diligence on site at the property we're buying now. Yesterday, we had 2 teams going inside every unit, and just doing interior stuff. We had people on the roof, we had HVAC and plumbing, we had electrician, and we had people measuring cabinets in every kitchen, measuring countertops, because I want answers. So when I am underwriting this thing, yeah, I kind of know it's an automated process. I know based on the square footage and the layout what approximately these things are going to be. But I already spit this out at you, saying that anything between 7,500 and 7,800 on the inside, you're good. Now, I am good because my PM has certain hookups and plugins that they can facilitate this for me. I'm not telling you that you could go to Lowe's and achieve these prices. Never going to happen. I'll tell you, you can't. Flat out, you can't. But do I know something of a starting point with variance? Yes. Will I have, during due diligence, people, vendors in my units? Yes, but again, that's only because of the relationships. That's like, the PM with 20,000 units under management is coming out to look at our stuff. Why? Because we have that relationship. And they're bringing third-party vendors to check out our stuff because we have that relationship. I hope that answers the question.
So a question that I have, that as I'm kind of thinking through some of this process of, raising rents and or setting rents and unit renovations and various things like that. I know you're using the property management company to do the primary, heavy lifting of the management of the day-to-day renovations once you acquire an asset. Do you guys have some sort of software that you guys use to manage and keep track of those renovations?
No, it's called spreadsheet. We just
And
have a
then,
spreadsheet that we share with the PM. I mean, they have very sophisticated spreadsheets that they've developed. And we just, they share those with us, and we just use those. We do not. Really don't get. So my system is really simple. Every week we get a report from the on-site property manager, and that has all of the vital data on all of the dynamics going on. Monthly we of course get the big, 200-page or whatever it is report from the property manager. But I have direct access to the guy that's going to be doing the interior renovations. I have direct access to the guy that's going to be doing all of the exterior work or managing all of the exterior work. So there's a lot of contact points, but no, to answer your question, no, we do not use a software.
And so in line with those same reports that you're getting with the property management, whether it be on-site or the monthly reporting, how often are you getting on calls with the property management company to manage the process, or at least have a say-so in some of the day-to-day decision-making?
Right. Well, I'm not really interested in a say-so in day-to-day decision-making, but I have in the cell phone, the cell phone of the PM on site on each property. And I have a cell phone for the regional manager. And, on Wednesday, we're meeting there to discuss the scope of work for adding a gym at one of our properties. So to answer your question, this is an ongoing process. We're not large enough to where this is a problem. Perhaps when we get much larger, we'll have to systematize better and really have scheduled times to sit down with people. But, I speak to somebody having to do something with the property several times every week.
And on another kind of, on the lines of doing estimates and stuff like that and projections, one of the biggest considerations when you're not, well, I say one of the biggest, it's not the biggest, but one of the biggest considerations when you're doing underwriting, I think, is managing the day-to-day. If you want, you can just press stop share on the screen there, and it'll just be you and I on the screen. That way you can kind of see the whole video there. There you go. So one of the important things is knowing how long it's going to actually take to renovate each one of the units, because it can completely change your underwriting when you're projecting that you're going to be able to get something done in 6 months versus 12 months versus 24 months.
So
how do you determine that?
So our underwriting model presumes a 2-year renovation. And it doesn't matter what the size of the community is, and basically it does that because it doesn't require additional physical vacancy in order to achieve that. So basically I look at it, let's say 100 units, we have 100 units. What's a 5% vacancy? That's 5 units per month. That's without us having to excessively hike rents and get people out in order so we can get our hands on these units so we can renovate them. So in most markets, you can still underwrite like a reasonable 5% vacancy is considered stabilized vacancy in most markets, right? At least that much. And in a 100-unit community, that's going to get you 5 units per month. So that's 5 units per month we can renovate. Well, that's 60 units per year. That means that within the scope of 2 years, we should be able to go through the entire community and renovate the entire community in 2 years. So that means on a 100-unit community, I want my PM to be able to handle 4 to 6 units per month.
And when you do your underwriting, are you breaking it down by month, or are you doing it by year?
By month.
Okay. And that's one of the things that we do as well, because I think it's important to kind of see that granular view, especially when you're doing that initial underwriting. Do you ever, instead of just using a 5% vacancy kind of rule of thumb, do you ever use the rent roll to see when the actual units are coming due?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. At one of our communities, it's a 98 unit, and we had 43, I think, units expiring within a 45-day period. I don't know how the previous ownership did this. I don't know what thought went through somebody's mind when they freaking did that. But half of the community, that's what we were facing, is half of the community emptying out. And just to give an example of what's happening there, we're renovating 5 units a month, basically. We've had the community for 4 months. It took us about a month and a half to dial in the scope. That's what I wanted to mention. So like, in addition to answering the question, how many units per month do you do? Well, you have to order the materials. You have to go through the units. You have to understand how many cabinets here, how many cabinets there. You can only do the units that you have vacant at the time you take over. So that process takes about a month and a half to 2 months before you can dial in your scope and you're ready to pump those babies out just like this without even doing it. So now that they're there, they're doing about 3 weeks. It takes them about 3 weeks to renovate a unit. And that means ripping out the kitchens and bathrooms and just like renovating each unit, okay? But in my underwriting, what we have is the physical vacancy that's stabilized. In addition to that, we have physical vacancy that's due to renovation. In addition to that, we have loss to lease due to renovations. In addition to that, we have loss to lease that's stabilized. We're merging all of these things together to where, like in the first year, it's really not uncommon to see, 20% economic loss applied to a property, because that's just what we're going to see, So if you're asking a question of what's my ARV? Well, the ARV looks like this, but you're not going to be there on day one. So what's it really going to look like on day one? That's when you start discounting all this stuff. And before you know it, you got 20% loss against what you think you need to have, and you will have once you're up to speed and you got the thing fixed up and turned around.
So as far as the physical vacancy, if the 5% rule you're talking about, is that basically looking at the historical occupancy of the vacancies?
No. This is just me saying, hey, in this market, how many units can I hope to get my hands on without forcing people out? And so I'm looking at that and I'm saying Phoenix is actually lower, but I'm saying we're going to hike rent. So at this particular property, we had 43 units. I think this month they renewed about 20 units. The average is I think it's $190 bump on classic condition. So that goes back to the presentation earlier on where I said, yeah, the previous ownership thought this is where the market was, but we're able to get $190 average increase on each one of those lease renewals without touching the units, simply because we're recapturing that LTL between the rent roll and what we think the classic really should be in this marketplace.
But when you're setting that 5%, are you basing that off? And you basing that off of 5% in addition to what the current historical vacancy is? So if you're normally getting 3 or 4%, you're going to add 5%.
No. I'm not using 5% in my underwriting at all.
Okay.
I'm just saying I want to remodel units within 2 years.
Right.
So if I have 100 units, I got to get at least 4 to 5 units per month. Is the historical vacancy going to allow me to get my hands on 4 to 5 units per month without forcing people out? And if it is, if I'm operating in the market, which historically runs at 8% vacancy, then I can remodel 7 or 8 units per month in that 100-unit property. And then my underwriting changes. It looks different because I can go through it faster. I can get my bumps faster from the renovated rents. I can have a fully functioning with new rents property, in a year and 4 months as opposed to 2 years. So that, I'm only using that as a kind of a guide to how many units I'll get my hands on.
So if you had a larger number of units, say like 398 or so, you would take 398
renovate
by 12?
4 times as many units. I would renovate because it's what is the natural, fluctuation in the marketplace as far as what the marketplace sees as physical vacancy. If it happens to be 5% or 6% or 4%, then I apply that to the number of units I have. That's how many vacant units I'm going to have. That's how many I should be renovating. Either renovating or releasing at classic rents, whatever we think the best strategy is. So then the question becomes, can your PM handle renovating 20 units a month, 30 units a month? Or are you going to a third party that does nothing but going through properties and renovate properties like that? So that's
Would you say that's one of the biggest hurdles to get over, or issues that you might have to overcome, is the timing on getting the subcontractors to get in there and do the work and making sure that you actually can complete it in that 24-month period?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that too.
A lot of times, when we're buying, we're using bridge financing right out of the gate, simply because the debt yield and the debt service coverage ratio is not enough for, out of the gate for the Fannie Freddie kind of stuff, fully amortized, stabilized stuff. So they're financing the rehab. Like the way we do it is we do 75% LTV or 70% LTV on the purchase and 100% LTV on the rehab. So that blends at about 75, 76% all in for the property. So they're going to expedite that because they want to get paid interest on that money. So they're going to say you have to draw all of your budget for renovations within a certain period of time. So that's like out of our hands. Within a certain period of time, we're paying interest on it. So I want to have those higher rents. Otherwise, what's the point?
And when you do a bridge loan, are you typically getting like a 3-1-1?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it basically means 3 years interest only. Usually it's interest. You can usually get interest only those first 3 years and then have an option to renew for the next 2 years or for 1 year increments. Another question that's come in here is what is the main threshold for hiring a property management company, and would a smaller unit complex warrant the hire, say 28 units, for example?
Good question. It's a crapshoot. The answer to that question really is, I think Dan would it's if we could give you a magic bullet, we would. It's just so hard, frankly, to find a truly professional PM. And that's what we're talking about. Truly professional. People interested in long-standing relationships, people interested in you buying 1,000 units and keeping them as managers, not the fly-by-night kind, not the people interested in get some money today, who cares what's going to happen with you or them or business tomorrow, right? It's really hard. I don't know. I hate to offer advice, except for that you got to sit down with people and you got to visit their property that they have under management and see how things are run. Word of mouth has a lot to do with it. Now, to the second half of your question, which is really a relevant question, how low will they go? That's a question of the top line. So professional management infrastructure is exactly this. It's an infrastructure. What does it include? It includes a usually 3 to 5% management fee that covers your regional manager that has maybe 10, 15 communities under them, and he travels to those communities to visit with the on-site personnel. It also covers the on-site personnel. So you have payroll. They pass the payroll on to you. So the question becomes, how many units does it take before your community is able to absorb A, payroll, and B, a property manager that's charging you 3 to 5%? And the answer to that question is, I think, pretty simple. If you're operating anywhere between $750 to $1,000 per door rent, it'll take about 100 units to get to that place where you can afford them. And if you have, $2,000 rents, you can do it with less units, obviously. But it's all a function of top line, okay? But typically nothing less than 100 units. Now, what a truly professional property manager is going to say, you have that 50 unit? I don't want it. I can't staff it. You can't afford it. I can't manage it without at least one maintenance crew on site and at least one person in the office. I can't run it the way my system is set up to run it without the pieces that I need in place. So I don't want it. Go hire a girl that works for a broker and sells houses part-time and manages rentals the other, go do that. And frankly, I'm not interested in that because I can't put people's money into that kind of infrastructure. I need to, if I'm going to raise money for these things, I want somebody on site full time that I have to pay payroll for. I want a management, maintenance guy on site full time who is going to be fixing stuff as stuff breaks.
That's HVAC certified.
Exactly. I want that stuff. I want it. I'm not interested in buying a community that doesn't allow me to have that stuff. I just, people call me with 60, 70 units. I say, I'm not interested. I don't know how to manage it. I literally don't know how to manage it. I'm not interested in half-assing it, and I'm not interested in discovering the wheel. So that's a good question. So that 24 unit to 60 unit is really a crapshoot. You can't really, Dan's
hard number of units.
I know, because he agrees. You can't systematize it, and it bogs you down, and you end up doing day-to-day stuff that you should never be doing, and you pull hair out on your head, and it just drives you nuts, and you lose money, and you hate real estate. I'm not telling you it's impossible. Like, if you live in Louisville, and you are going to be the guy in the suspenders with a hammer in your hand, and that's what you do, and you have 100 units, God bless. It's not what I do. It's not what Dan does.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Very true. Well, we have no more questions here, Ben. I want you to talk to us a little bit more about this event that you have coming up next week, and I'm going to put the link into the chat box here so that everybody can have the link and jump over to there. It's called the Phoenix Syndication Workshop, and that we can kind of give us some of the highlights of what they're going to be expecting to see next week.
Okay. I'm wondering if they can see this right now.
Yep, we can see it.
Cool. Very cool. So the way this came about is very interesting. Of course, I've been teaching people about real estate for a decade now. Cashflow Freedom University on my website, justaskbenly.com. I've been doing this. Most people that enroll in that are BPers. It's a few $100s. It's very, very inexpensive course, but it's for beginners, people trying to figure out small multifamily, that kind of thing. The way this came about is I had a revelation about 2.5 years ago that says, you know how Rich Dad says, if you want a doodad, buy an asset over here that produces money and then use that money to pay for the doodad. And then you don't have to feel bad about buying a doodad because you didn't have to pay for it. Your asset paid for it, right? So I took it one step further and I said, I want something, and it could be and should probably be considered a doodad. But can I twist it upside down and make it into an asset of its own so it makes the money with which to pay for thyself, essentially? Well, I want to donate to charity. So my wife and I donate to charity. We donate as much as we can, but it never feels like enough. And so at one point, I just asked myself, listen, I said, why don't I build a business infrastructure, a business proposition, and I incorporate charitable giving as part of the operating expenses of that proposition. So the charity actually gets paid first before I get paid. And there's no conflict of interest because I never see that money. I'm not reaching in my pocket and writing a check. It's money that I never saw. Well, I talked to my partner, Sam, and I said, well, people want to learn about syndication, so why don't we teach them, and why don't we donate 20% of the gross revenue to charity? And that's basically how the whole thing, about 6 months ago, we decided to put this together, Phoenix Syndication Workshop. It's the first one. We're donating 20% to charity. It's on January 26th and 27th. It's a 2-day event. We're going to spend the first day buried with our heads in spreadsheets. We're going to walk you through the underwriting, every minutia, every piece by piece at a time. The second day, we have Jillian Sadati coming up. She's our SEC attorney. She's going to talk to you. We have the property manager coming in. They're going to talk to you. We have a Berkadia real estate broker a real estate mortgage broker coming in to talk to you. We have our real estate, one of the brokers we work with, coming in to talk to you. And we're also going to put you on the bus and take you to one of the communities in the second day. So it's a very, very high octane event. A lot of information is going to be given out. And you can register at justaskbenwhy.com/Phoenix. So justaskbenwhy.com is my website. /Phoenix is going to take you to the registration page of this. I'm pretty psyched about it because we're going to make a really nice, very substantial contribution. It's not going to be a large group. I think we have about under 50 so far registered. But these folks are paying a couple $1,000s to be there. And these folks are realizing they're going to learn. If you're a newbie, maybe this isn't exactly the right event at this time. Because a lot of the information is probably going to be a little more advanced than what you need at this point. Maybe CFFU on my website is probably more appropriate. But, you know, if you had your mind blown by Dan and I talking about how a 24 unit is nothing but a disaster waiting to happen, it's a nightmare, and how this is the first time you heard anybody ever talk about this, and you want to see the numbers behind it that validate those statements, and you are ready and you have enough kind of erudite around real estate to understand conceptually what we're talking about, maybe this is a good event for you. So this is the first one, and it's kind of cool because we're going to have another one next year. And another charity is going to benefit from it. And we're going to have another one year after that, and another charity is going to benefit from it. We're a lot of young professionals, a lot of people with portfolios of 10, 20, 30 units coming. So again, maybe not so much for newbies, maybe more for, I don't want to say seasoned investors, but people who have been doing this for a few years at least. But yeah. This is next weekend. We also have a couple of spots still open in the VIP. We have a dinner for the VIPs on Friday night, and we have another event on Sunday evening for the VIPs, which is going to be interesting because we're inviting all of our speakers to a very intimate dinner with VIPs, and you can kind of ask some questions and get some straight answers. It's a good opportunity. I think a lot of people.
Go ahead. I was going to say, so if you're interested, I did put the links into the chat box. So you can go check out the website there and find the details. And, you know, I do want to extend a thank you, Ben, for taking the time to share your expertise and your knowledge on the summit today. And any final parting words before I let you go?
I have a couple. I just lost one of my mentors from early on. He just passed away. Couple of things that I learned a lot of things from him, but the two things that I want to leave you with. One is that stepping stones and stumbling blocks look an awful lot alike from a distance. So, you can't be looking at them from a distance if you ever want to try to figure out what's an opportunity and what is a stumbling block. You got to get off your honey and you got to get close to that stone to try to figure it out. Number two is that you have to know the difference between that which is a stumbling block and that which is an opportunity, which is where summits like this and syndication workshop like mine come into place, because we're going to teach you that. And the other thing is, well, you know what? That's enough. I'll leave you with that. Stumbling blocks and stepping stones look an awful lot alike from a distance.
Great. Well, thank you again so much, Ben, for being here with us. Looking forward to continuing to follow you and maybe even make it out to one of your workshops one of these days as well.
Fantastic. It's my pleasure to be with you. Thank you for the invite. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Ben. All right, coming up next in room one here is going to be Finding the Best Markets and Submarkets with John Casman. So he'll be joining us here, and we'll be starting off in about 11 minutes from now. And so go grab a snack, go use the restroom, and we'll see you back here. And also, don't forget to go to nextmfin.com to register for the event coming up in June. Get the lowest price right now. And also, please, please, please go fill out the survey. The surveys are very important, and I wish you will. I wish you would go fill it out. I know a few of you had some problems with it yesterday. We fixed those issues, so please go back, fill it out, and help us out with the survey. Going to mfinsurvey.com.